to a new episode of Her Voice, the show that represents the global women of today. While women were relatively less visible in the streets and public squares prior to the Arab uprisings, over the past several years, young women have carved out a robust participatory and leadership role for themselves in cyberspace. Women's involvement in the Arab Spring went beyond direct participation in the protests to include leading and organizing protesters and cyber activism. But cyber activism seems to have become a more popular trend in Egypt and Tunisia for socio-political controversy, building domestic support and influencing the Western policy agenda, often via the mainstream media. In today's show, we will be asking our guests, how this cyber activism changed the role of women in politics? Has it continued to expand in Egypt and Tunisia to consolidate the revolution? And has it inspired women of all ages and education to participate in these revolutions, both online and offline? These are some of the questions that we will be asking our guests on today's show. But first, let's watch the video that explains how it all started.
In the decade preceding the Arab Spring, internet access in the region expanded from near nothing in 2000 to 40% of the population by 2010. By the time of the uprisings, there were more than 16.8 million Facebook accounts in the region, representing about 13% of the population. With Egypt accounting for 5 million of those accounts and Tunisia 2 million, not surprisingly, youth made up a majority of users of these social media, with approximately 70% of the region's Facebook accounts belonging to people under the age of 29. As the uprisings unfolded throughout 2011, a dramatic rise in social media usage occurred, with the number of Facebook users increasing by 68% between January and November, a doubling from the prior year that represented a penetration rate of about 10% of the population and made it one of the fastest growing regions on Facebook. Social media has enabled women to participate in the Arab Spring as organizers, journalists and activists. Protesters used Facebook to mobilize supporters and organize events, and YouTube videos and Flickr photos gave the rest of the world visuals of the events of the spring. Twitter functioned as a live newsfeed for other domestic and international activists, as well as international media organizations, and it quickly grew from about 3,000 Twitter users in the Middle East in 2009 to around 40,000 by mid-2010. 9% of the Middle East and North Africa internet users said in a 2010 survey they used Twitter, with Egyptians representing 13% of the region's users, the second highest usage after the United Arab Emirates. Since the beginning, Twitter has been used in the Middle East to communicate with journalists, perhaps explaining the fact that users tweet about the same amount in English as Arabic, with women more likely to do so than men. Mobile phones, especially those with cameras and internet access, served as a key tool for cyber activists. Blogs were another vital method for women to disseminate information. The numbers of female and male bloggers from Arab Spring countries were relatively even. Since older males dominate most conventional media networks in the Arab Spring countries, cyber activism gave women their own voice both domestically and abroad. Younger women, generally the most excluded from traditional news outlets, benefited the most from the rise of social media. The new platforms also enabled protesters, both male and female, to get their messages out without the filter of state-run media. Social media helped women engage more people in their revolutions by reducing distinctions between social and political networks. The third Arab social media report found that regionally, women used social media during the revolution about equally to raise awareness inside their countries about the causes of the revolutions and to share and spread information with the world, whereas men focused more on the former.
To discuss this topic in more detail is with me now Dr. Hala Sleet, Program Director for Initial Teacher Training Program and President of the Egyptian British Education Association and initiator of the National Education Initiative in Egypt to make education a national security project for the country. And I also have Ms. Raneem Hannoush, a Jordanian journalist majored in politics. Welcome to the show, ladies, and thank you for joining us. Thank you. Dr. Hala, social media and the internet has enabled young women these days to play a central role in the revolutionary struggles in Egypt and Tunisia, whether as revolutionaries or citizens or journalists or even organizers. What's your views about this, in particular to what's happening in Egypt?
To start with, good evening, everybody, and thanks very much for inviting me. I think you are really quite right. If we go back 3 years ago with the 30th of June revolution, I think the seeds had started really on the internet and the Facebook and the social media. And the Egyptian women have had a vital contribution to the uprising and the 30th of June revolution to support by all means and all shapes, not only in the streets, but also online.
Yes.
And I was really privileged, and still privileged, that I've been part of all this. And this really didn't stop, but has continued. So we now trying to do our best to look forward to the future and build our new Egypt. And without a shadow of a doubt, the Facebook not only enabled young women, but also older women like myself to take part in this. And really with critical observation to what's going on in Egypt, and in particular in the street and the different media. We have realized that the cause for so many problems which we currently encounter and have is due really to the education and the education system, which has been inherited over 50 years. And this really has been the start. And I started this really on Facebook to start drawing people's attention to the importance of education and what education could do to enable Egypt to move to the future.
I see. What would you comment on this then, Rani? I mean, you know, using Facebook and sort of trying to promote, you know, the underlying problems that are sort of, you know, being faced and happening in Egypt, which is obviously, in Dr. Hala's opinion, is education. What's your comment about this?
I believe that women take to the cybersphere because it's the most democratic platform where everyone has some sort of equal representation in that sense, and that your voice is heard. You are less likely to be harassed in that sense because you actually have a voice equal to anyone else's voice on the platform. Using social media outlets has enabled women to organize and create movements from the grassroots going up. How effective that is, I still am not really sure, but we have seen cases of really successful movements that have started from the cybersphere and were transported into the real realm. So.
I see. I mean, obviously the causes of the Arab Spring are numerous and they are very complex. And many spoke about the big role that social media has played in propagating it. What's your view about it? I don't know, Dr. Hala, what do you think?
I think you are quite right. Say, talking about Egypt, if we go back to the 25th of January, which really happened 4 years ago, without a shadow of a doubt, that this started really on Facebook. And the social media has played a fundamental and vital part in the revolution, followed up by the 30th of June revolution. So I think it is really a big part of the truth in what you have said.
What do you think, Rani? I mean, it's just your opinion.
I believe that social media played a vital role in organizing protests, in getting people together and starting the whole thing. Because it was, as I said, the democratic platform within which you could transform into reality. But I feel that even though social media greatly contributed into what culminated into a so-called Arab Spring and then the second revolution that came afterwards, it wasn't completely dependent on social media. There were several factors that have sparked and caused and helped cultivate the revolutions in Egypt and elsewhere.
Yes. You mentioned the fact that you use Facebook, okay, to promote the purpose of highlighting and improving the education system in Egypt. What made you decide to do this, Hala? What was this thing that's, you know, so badly you wanted to do, and what made you do it?
All right. When I really started my Facebook 3 years ago, it was mainly to support Sisi and the Egyptian army against the Muslim Brotherhood. That has been really my pure and main intention. Being away from the grassroots, from my own land, my own country, there was nothing else I could have done apart from opening a Facebook page to support as much as I can. I said, a little bit better than nothing in actual
absolutely.
fact.
Yes.
And I have to admit, one thing have led to another by critical observations on the kind of discussion we have in Facebook, by going to Egypt for serial visits. I've realized that the grassroots of the problem in actual fact is not the Muslim Brotherhood. It's what created the Muslim Brotherhood, which is lack of good education system, lack of critical thinking. People, education is based only on knowledge rather than thinking and analyzing situations and critically evaluating really what is going on. And because of my background in education and what I do currently in education, I began really to look critically at the causes of what led us to where we are now. So I've realized in the great extent that education has played a fundamental role in actual fact to lead us not only in Egypt, but across all the Arab countries to where we are now.
Right.
And I've started really diverting my attention. Still, of course, I greatly support the CC and the army without a shadow of a doubt.
Yes.
And I realize really by focusing on one part or one project, maybe I will benefit more than just talking generally about everything. And because of my interest and my job and my current career in education, I really decided to focus on education.
So this project of yours, which is the National Education Initiative in Egypt, what's the purpose behind it? And not only that, why is it national security?
Well, in actual fact, if you look back 50 years ago, probably more, the Egyptian governments really played a fundamental part in building Egypt, looking at the infrastructure of Egypt, the roads, building canals, building schools, but there unfortunately hasn't been enough interest in building the human being.
Right.
And that's why I've decided, and a group of people with me, we decided that we need really to play or to put more emphasis in actual fact on the political power in Egypt. It's like a slight pressure, but in a positive manner, in a positive way, to make education a national project, which we call it tahaddur.
Yes.
It means it's the way for Egypt to
forward,
move
to become modernized,
more
yes.
modernized
Yes.
and more exactly civilized. And that's what we call it التعليم مشروع أمن قومي. In actual fact, it's more than just changing a curriculum.
Yes.
It's more than just really raising the capitation of education in Egypt. We are looking at holistic picture that all sectors in Egypt should play or put a strategy in actual fact to make education a national project to contribute to every part and every sector of the Egyptian state.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as a journalist, Ranim, do you believe that the failing education systems in countries like obviously Tunisia and Egypt were the sole reason why the young people today are failing in society? Because obviously that's what Dr. Hala is trying to promote and trying to do, and she's trying to sort of recreate a new, let's just call it a new society.
Yes. I believe that the education system is a core requirement for any country to have successful, progressive youth. My issue with the education in the Arab world is not that we don't have any qualified doctors or engineers. We do have an oversaturated amount in that sense. My problem is that the Arabic curricula in general do not really enforce critical thinking and skill building within the students. And they also have this sense of an appreciation to students who have more artistic tendencies.
Yes.
Because whenever we were growing up, it's like you have to become a doctor, a lawyer.
That's true. That's
I'm not
true,
belittling any of those professions, but those shouldn't be just the right ones in the Arab world. And you have to work on it from a young age to actually cater to the talents and the separate skills of each and every individual student. And that's what we need to work on, the ability to create the youth generations who are actually able to think critically for themselves and not just absorb what they are giving in order to become rational decision makers in the future.
Okay. All right. We also should have somebody on the phone, but I'm just waiting for her to be with us. Just going back to what you said about the education system, and this is what obviously you're trying to promote at the moment. How are you going to do it? Because it's a big thing, it's a big project. And obviously Facebook isn't going to be enough, although I know that you've got so many, like thousands of followers at the moment. So, and you've been in Egypt and you've been trying to actually have these press conferences and trying to bring, more sort of awareness of it. But how are you going to do it? It's a big thing.
Well, of course, I won't be able to do it on my own.
Yes.
I might have started the initiative, but I have now a group of people who strongly really believe that the education is the future for Egypt, without a shadow of a doubt. So having the strong belief, again, having a presence in actual fact on the ground.
Yes.
So social media currently is not enough. So we have devised or designed what we call it استمارة التحضر, which is the way for modernization, as exactly translated kindly.
Yes.
And we're really appealing to every Egyptian to sign this form, in actual fact, something like tamarrud. So we got it really from tamarrud.
Yes.
So we are resenting, in actual fact, or نتمرد على التخلف والجهل.
Yes.
So التحضر is a way for modernization against really what Egypt has experienced recently, from having those Muslim fundamentalism, having those weird and stupid and crazy idea which they came up with, which unfortunately have divided the Egyptian society. So we are beginning really now to launch a collective action, in actual fact appealing to every Egyptian to sign this form. So are hoping that tens of millions will be able to do it. So we are beginning really to organize properly, and still it's in early days, and that's why we want the media to support us, in actual fact, to spread the word of tahaddur everywhere. That if what we are hoping really to do, that we go to the CEC with 90 millions of those forms to say that's the Egyptian really wanting to do. And I really have a strong belief, and I have a full faith on him that he would respond.
I hope so, I really do. And obviously this is the first platform, I think the best platform for us to actually get our voice heard. Okay, we also have with us now is Lina bin Meheni. She's one of the early adopters of social media who established herself as a cyber activist in the years leading up to the revolutions. She covered the uprisings in her home country, Tunisia, and ended up becoming a hub, receiving enormous amounts of media attention and rank among the most influential blogs and media outlets in the region. So we are pleased to have Lina now with us. So welcome, Lina, to the show.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to the show.
You're more than welcome, Lina. And sorry, it's so early where you are at the moment. You're in Washington, so it must be really early in the morning. Lina, you stated that Tunisia's revolution cannot be called an internet revolution, and insisted that the revolution against Ben Ali was fought on the ground through demonstrations and resistance. Could you please explain to us why?
Yes, of course. It's true that internet helping in achieving this revolution or revolutionary process, because personally I consider that the revolution is still going on. We didn't fulfill the objectives of the revolution yet. Yeah, it's true that internet played two important roles. It helped in informing people and mobilizing them about what was going on, and in breaking the media blackout that the regime was trying to impose on the events, on what was happening in Tunisia. But we don't have to forget that there were people who were fighting on the ground, people who faced live ammunition, who faced the savage violence of the security forces, and people who lost their lives during the revolution. We have people who are still suffering, the wounded of the revolution, who didn't get the appropriate health care until today, and those people played an important role in the revolution. We cannot achieve a revolution using internet. We have to use internet, but we have to take to the streets to make pressure.
And Lina, both your parents are political activists. How much influence did they have on your decision to take part in the Tunisian revolution?
Let me say that when I started blogging, when I started using internet to fight against the Tunisian regime, my parents were not really aware of what was going on. But let me say that I grew up in a very committed and engaged environment, and this helped me in understanding what was going on around me. So their influence wasn't really direct on my cyber activism, but it is linked to the education I've got.
Yes, I mean, we're going back to education. We've got Dr. Hala Salit here in the studio. She herself is actually a lecturer, and she's actually initiated the education, which is what you're trying to sort of improve the education system in Egypt. Do you have the same purpose in mind for you to try and improve? I mean, do you think the education is important? Is to actually start changing people's mentality?
Yes, of course. We need education to change people mentality. We need education to have progress. Let me say that today in Tunisia, the educational system is one of the worst in the world. We are experiencing many problems with our educational system, and I think that we have to reform the educational system in order to achieve the objectives of the revolution. We can't move on without education. It's very, very important. I'm a teacher too,
Yeah.
and I'm facing problems with my students, with the educational system every day.
Yes, yes. In the article that you wrote in the English newspaper, The Guardian, you asked the question, did we really succeed in fulfilling the objectives of the revolution? How would you answer it, Lina?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think that we have succeeded in achieving the objectives of the revolution. As I said in the articles, when people took to the streets in December 2010 and January 2011, they were asking for employment, for freedom, for dignity. But today we can notice that the majority of these objectives were not achieved. Let me say that we are experiencing problems in different fields. Let me say that the rate of unemployment went up. As I said earlier, until today, the transitional justice wasn't fulfilled. Let me say that today, torture and the problems with the police, the absence of dignity, are still existent. So there are so many problems, and none of the governments who came after that of Ben Ali really worked on the fulfillment of the objectives of the revolution. But we have to keep on fighting to achieve them. We don't have to give up. This is why I'm still writing about what's going on, about the different problems my country is experiencing.
I see. This is actually a question I would like to ask my guests. Do you think we've succeeded in achieving the objectives? What do you think?
Shall I start?
Yes, Dr. Hala.
Well, my views on this, to be honest, you can't talk about democracy, freedom, dignity in a country where majority of people are uneducated. I think it is definitely the wrong start. Education equal freedom, equal dignity, equal democracy. So if we want really to move forward, we can talk endless. We are going to achieve nothing without educating people. And we talk about education in a holistic manner, not only education in schools or universities. We talk about other means of educating people. It can be, for example, via the media, via the art, in actual fact. So without really considering and moving forward with education in holistic way, there is no chance for us to talk about freedom or to talk about dignity or to talk about democracy. That's my views anyhow.
What do you think, Ranim?
I believe that we are nowhere near achieving the primary goals that were set when all the events started in 2011. I mean, I believe that the most successful example was Tunisia, but that's because they already had a stable civil society before the revolution. And this is something missing in most Arab countries nowadays.
Yes.
In terms of the aftermath of the so-called Arab Spring, you had a lot of religious extremists bandwagon on the wave of change, hindering the actually the achievement of the revolution's goals. And even though women were on the front line of the revolutions when it started in 2011, they were actually excluded towards the later stages when it became armed violence. We need to be careful not to fall in the trap being used as an instrument, because we've seen it women being utilized and used in revolutions before. For example, in the French Revolution, in the kangaroo court trials, you would have the knitters on the side pleading for the executions, using a female figure. In the Bolshevik movement as well, Lenin assigned his his wife and 2 other women
Yes.
as ministers, just as he got in power.
I see.
So we need to understand the difference between actually achieving the goals or just being as an image, just
Yes.
for like PR. So we need to be very aware
That's
of
true.
that.
Yes. What do you think of that, Lena? What do you think of what our guests are saying?
Well, let me say that people have a tendency to say that Tunisia is the most successful, or the Tunisian revolution is the most successful one. Yeah, it's true if we make comparisons, but I don't agree with that. Let me say that in Tunisia, we are experiencing a regression on all plans. In Tunisia today, we are facing a new big problem, which is terrorism. It's true that we don't hear about bloodbaths as it is the case in other countries of the so-called Arab Spring, but we are experiencing problems. We have this problem of terrorism. We are losing people every day due to terrorism.
That's
It's
true.
true that media are not really talking about that, but we have many problems. I don't agree with the fact that people say that it's a successful revolution because we have succeeded in having fair elections or a new government. As I said, the most important objectives of the revolution were not fulfilled. We are going back to the same situation as the situation we were experiencing under the regime of Ben Ali. It's true that we succeeded in getting rid of Ben Ali, but the whole system is still in place.
Yes.
We are back to old practices. The people who used to be loyal to Ben Ali are back to power today, and I don't think that this is real success. It is not because we don't have bloodbaths that the revolution is successful in Tunisia.
Right. One more question, Lena, before we leave you. In 2011, it was reported that you have been a candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize for your contributions and activism during the Tunisian Revolution. And yet, this has aroused an outcry, particularly on social media, from Tunisians attacking you for the attention you are receiving from the outside world. What's your views on this?
Yeah, let me say that, first of all, I was surprised by this nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize,
Yeah.
and I was really shocked by the reaction of many Tunisians. You know, for me, when I started writing on my blog, I didn't do that to have prizes or to be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. So I was really shocked by the reaction of Tunisians. But later on, I understood what happened. I was attacked by extremists, and let me say that today I'm living under the close protection of the police because of the death threats I was receiving, and I'm still receiving until today. And I was attacked by people who were just jealous. So
I'm sure there's a lot of jealousy there. I'm sure there will be.
yeah. So well, as I said, what's the most important thing for me is to keep on fighting. Is to keep on fighting to fulfill the objectives of the revolution. Even if I were attacked by Tunisians, I didn't stop doing the same thing, trying to give a voice to people who don't have a voice, trying to show what is really going on in my country, and trying to achieve the objectives of the revolution.
Lena bin Mahani, we are so pleased to have you on the show, and we do wish you all the best in what your sort of objectives are and what you're trying to actually do and the cause for your country. So thank you so much, and thank you for staying up so late as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Take care. Okay, we're going to have a short break, and afterwards we're going to continue with some more about the social media and women activists. Come back. Hello and welcome back. Also on the phone we have Ms. Nisreen Salem. She's a feminist writer and researcher from Egypt. Welcome to the show, Nisreen.
Thank you for having me, Dina.
You're welcome. Nisreen, why do you describe yourself as a feminist, and how did it all start?
Well, I started labeling myself as a feminist during the Egyptian uprising. However, my feminist ideals were very much innate in me since childhood. I identify myself as a feminist today just to show solidarity with my fellow feminists and our stand against anything that purports to oppressing or humiliating or shaming or discriminating against women or anyone else. It doesn't just have to be women based on gender, race or colour or religion and so on.
Fantastic. Nisreen, you're very active on Twitter and you have thousands of followers. What makes you different from any other female blogger or activist?
I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I'm different or if I see myself as different.
Yeah.
Because I can't ask all my followers why they follow me. But I use Twitter as a space to think out loud, and that seems to resonate with many of my followers. So I use it as a space to express my opinions openly, to question things, to muse, to quote, to spread interesting articles and so on.
Right.
So I guess that has an appeal to a certain a group of people who enjoy what I tweet about, I suppose.
Yes, yes. Philip Howard defines cyber activism as the act of using the internet to advance a political cause that is difficult to advance offline. How much of this is true for you during the Egyptian revolution?
Well, the Egyptian uprising certainly used social media to advance and recruit on the ground. However, Egyptians have been using social media to build up for the uprising years before it even started. There were many bloggers on the scene from 2006, as early as that. People like SandMonkey, who blogged prolifically about Egypt, and Mona Saif as well, about the problems, the judiciary and so on. It certainly was an active tool during the uprising. It was used, for example, to report on any arrests, any injuries, any deaths. We used it. I personally used Twitter to tweet about tips on first aid and so on. Yeah. Translated things from English to Arabic to help Egyptians on the ground. So it certainly was a tool of advancement at the time.
I see. Dr. Hala, do you believe, though, that the sort of voices outside the Middle East have actually put more pressure on governments for change?
I wouldn't really say, you mean the Egyptian government currently?
Yes.
I wouldn't say pressure, no, because you can't really exercise pressure outside Egypt in a negative manner. This is something I totally dislike and I won't respect. But probably it has enabled them probably to think about issues in actual fact, thinking about issues which perhaps they haven't thought about before. But describing the word as pressure, I don't think it's pressure in that sense. From Egyptian, you mean? Is that what you mean? Egyptian?
Yes.
No, I don't think
because,
it's,
you've got the likes, obviously, with Nisreen. Nisreen, she used to live here in the UK, and then she's moved over to Egypt. Yeah. And while she was here in the UK, she was exercising, her sort of role as somebody that's actually sort of with the revolution and trying to sort of share her opinion on Twitter. And I think it was Facebook as well, wasn't it, Nisreen? So, she was quite active in that sense. So do you believe that as actually, like Nisreen, and other people, do you think that would actually put pressure on the Egyptian government or even any government, as I say?
Well, I can only talk about my experience. When I started the Facebook, the intention hasn't been in actual fact putting pressure on anybody.
Right.
As rightly Nisreen said, it was merely really thinking aloud in actual fact about my ideas, about my belief, about my support to the Egyptian government or to Sisi and the army. So it turned out that you have people who supported these views in actual fact. So in a collective manner, in a collective way, yes, in a sense, who are trying to exercise pressure. I talk about education here and educational agenda, but not in a negative way, definitely in a positive way, to offer probably more ideas, things outside the box who probably people haven't thought about before. Because here we are really experience different culture, different way of thinking, and you try really to help as much as you could. So that's my views.
Yeah. Raneem, what backlash did you face as a woman politician and journalist in your line of work? And I'm going to ask that question as well with Nisreen. I'm sure she had some sort of negative sort of comments and feedback from people, being a feminist.
Yes, basically, while I was doing my master's research about the partisan media in Egypt before the 30th of June, I had to be interviewing members of both so-called camps, the liberal and the Islamist, and I had to wear a headscarf in order to talk to them, not just out of respect, which I would do anyway out of respect, but just for them to be willing to talk to me, and they would talk down on me. So that's a sense of discrimination I felt because I was a woman. In other instances, a lot of my pieces I write about are about Daesh, ISIS, and their presence and their media bubble, their cyber media bubble, and I have received a few threatening direct messages on Twitter or elsewhere. So it's always threatening if you actually go in and with the aim to discover some topics that have some red tape on them.
Yes.
As a woman or as a normal journalist as well.
Yes, yeah. I mean, Nisreen, I was going to ask you that question. What sort of reaction do you get from your followers when they read your feminist articles, especially from your home country, Egypt, say?
Well, there's always been mixed reactions. Most of it has been very supportive and very positive. However, I have found that I used to get attacks from conservatives, particularly males, who did not like my somewhat free thinking or liberal thinking, or disagreed with it, particularly when it came to things like domestic violence.
Right.
Right.
Terrible.
And on the other hand, as an Egyptian tweeting, particularly when I was in the UK, when I was tweeting from there, a lot of the criticism I got was, you don't live in Egypt, you don't know what it's like on the ground. And that was quite hurtful, because in a way, they kind of alienate you despite you trying to reach out. And things of that sort, really.
Yeah. Can you actually see the relationship there? Yeah, you can
I
relate to her. Can
Absolutely. And always my answer has been yes. Although I don't live on ground and I don't experience sort of problems you do, I totally agree. But I have full knowledge of the sort of problems you have. I'm Egyptian, we are still in contact with our homeland, and I definitely agree with Nisreen. They always look at you in a doubt, in a sense you are coming from a different really trans or a different world from their own world. And it's quite hurtful in actual fact, because our intention is positive, is to help and support.
Absolutely. You belong to their country. You know,
Absolutely.
It's your country as well.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you've got the right to share your views as well. I mean, how has the field playing has changed now, especially when it's no longer on social media and people have stopped sort of wasting their time and are actually doing something about their rights and beliefs, and, you know, wasting their time as in, you know, they don't sort of spend more time on social media rather than actually wanting to be there out on the ground. So how's that changed?
It's actually had a very positive change. Now people have left, not so much left, but stopped spending so much time on social media and have actually gone to the fields.
Right.
So it has given, social media has given a thinking space to begin with, which was the right way to use it. And now so many movements and so many NGOs and groups have been formed on the ground, things like anti-harassment movements and feminist unions and groups, and even groups that want to start focusing on particular social deficiencies that we have in our communities, such as aiding people with disabilities, or looking into education, particularly education for people with special needs or children with special needs.
Yes.
So it's a very positive sign that.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Nisreen, for
rather than just
joining us. Sorry, I didn't catch what you said there.
I'm just saying that it's a very positive thing and it's very promising.
No, I hope so. And this is something that we are actually hoping that things will actually change to the better. But you carry on doing what you're doing best, and good luck for the future, Nisreen. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Dina.
Thank you. Raneem, I was going to ask you, What's more effective at the moment? Is it cyberspace, as in, you know, social media, or is it more of the reading the newspaper, or is it watching sort of obviously programs and the news and so on? What's more effective, do you think, in transmitting, you know, sort of news and politics and so on?
Mm-hmm. I think most of the people think that there's a friction between the mainstream media and the social media. But from a journalistic point of view, I think they can complement each other.
Yeah.
So the social media has no filter. Everything is on there.
Yes.
But only certain things that need to be picked up by the mainstream media for their agenda
Yes.
is picked up.
Yes.
So social media might give hints of dictating the agenda. The mainstream media will be the platform in order to filter what's worth looking at in their opinion.
Yes.
For example, WikiLeaks.
Yes.
They only got picked up, widely spread when they made a deal with 5 major newspapers in order to create the wires into readable journalistic articles by Le Monde and the Guardian, etc. So that's a prime example. Another example I don't really like endorsing, but it's worth mentioning, is the online presence of extremist groups like Daesh, ISIS.
Yes, yes.
I believe that maybe you've witnessed lately that their voice has been lowered in mainstream media. But the thing is, if you monitor social media, they're still there, they're still as active as before. But mainstream media has chosen recently not to pick up their recordings and their tweets and their activity on social media into the mainstream media.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, it is quite actually sort of scary to actually know the fact that they're much stronger on social media rather than, you know, mainstream media, because, you know, women generally, you know, like myself and maybe many others who find it sort of easier to actually just go online and search for the things that they want to know about and learn about. So for them to actually be able to have complete access over the social media, that is quite worrying. Dr. Hala, now obviously you have managed to sort of bring your voice and raise your voice and bring it over to Egypt now. So what's next? What's coming up now? What is it that we're going to find or sort of wait from Hala or expect from Hala, Dr. Hala?
Well, I wouldn't say expect from Hala, but expect from us.
Yes.
Rather than talk about myself, I talk about the group of Egyptian I'm working with currently. We will continue, of course, our campaign online.
Yes.
This is going to expand. We are going to have a platform for electronic signature
Yes.
for Tahaddur,
استمارة
التحضر.
Yeah.
And we will be moving gradually now on the ground, moving to rather social media. We will complement this, as you rightly said, to newspaper, the hard copies, and moving to the ground to all parts of Egypt, in actual fact, to have conferences, to raise people's awareness of the importance of education, and gain their support and gain their signature on the form.
Fantastic.
So I think this has been the start. We only started a month ago, and we're getting ourselves organized, but watch the space.
Wonderful. I am actually looking forward to it because it sounds quite exciting and it sounds like a really, really big project ahead of you. So good luck with that, Dr. Hala. So you did say that Facebook was one of the platforms that you're actually using. Which other platforms would you consider actually using? Because that's something that I wanted to find out from you.
Of course, we are going to have soon, in actual fact, 1st of June, we are going to have our own website.
All right.
And that's, of course, that with the electronic signature will be connected to the website. And of course, that will be a mass spread to the
so
new
again,
initiative.
using social media.
Absolutely. Twitters, we'll still have our own Twitters, of course, we are building this up. Yes, so, but social media is not going to be the only thing. As I said, we are moving now to the ground because, yes, you are thinking aloud in the social media, you are getting yourself organized, but the actual action will have to move in actual fact on the ground.
Would you not hear sort of maybe you know, critical people that sort of start sort of making comments about the fact that, you know, she's a woman, she's not going to be able to make it, it should be a man behind it, you know, not a woman. How would you actually answer them?
Well, I think the criticism I have, not because I'm a woman,
Yes.
but probably they think, they are quite skeptical, this is a mad idea, it's not going to work.
I see.
We have been for 60 years going through what we are going through, what difference this is going to make. So I think I reckon the criticism is not because I'm a woman, but because of, I think they lack the confidence and the trust and the belief that things could really move forward and can be much better from where we are now.
Yeah.
But the good news, the criticism I have and the people are criticizing me are very, very minority, very, very few in actual fact. Education is in the heart of every Egyptian.
Yes,
so
yes.
I have really a mass
And it's
support.
not only Egyptians, I think it's
Yes,
actually
yes,
the whole
yes,
of the Middle
yeah,
East,
absolutely,
you know, so
absolutely.
it's something that I think we should work so hard on trying to improve. How far are we from stabilization in the Middle East?
I don't want to be very skeptical, but I think I have to be. We are far from stabilization in the Middle East, but maybe in some countries more than the other. But I feel that in order to actually achieve democracy and the basic goals of the so-called Arab Spring, we need to actually achieve the neutralization and the stability in order to spread democracy and freedom. But I think that would be tackled by starting with facing all the undertones of extremism and the more obvious extremist armed struggles and militias in the Middle East, because that concept is alien to our culture. It's something new and we shouldn't accept it and we shouldn't adopt it as part of something that has existed before, because it hasn't. It's an alien concept. And in order to neutralize and stabilize the Middle East, you need to acknowledge that and fight against
That's
it.
right. Dr. Hala.
Well, really following up from what my colleague said, I'm more optimistic about Egypt probably than other Arab countries, because I think we are very, very fortunate and very lucky to have Sisi and to have our army. And without a shadow of a doubt, that has enabled Egypt in actual fact to stabilize much quicker than other Arab countries. Still, we have a long way to go, but we made an excellent start. If you visit Egypt now, it's very different from Egypt 2-3 years ago. Everybody started to notice the difference. We still have a long way to go, but I think we are on the right track, and I'm more optimistic that things in Egypt, give it probably 3 to 5 years, will be much, much better from where we are now.
I hope so. I really, really do. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our show. I would really like to thank Dr. Hala Salih. She's a university lecturer and initiator of the National Education Initiative in Egypt. Thank you for joining me today. And I would also like to thank Ms. Raneem Hannoush. She's a Jordanian journalist and also who works as a journalist. So thank you so much for joining me, ladies. I would also like to thank Ms. Nasreen Salim for speaking to us via Skype, and also Ms. Lina bin Mahani for taking part in the show via Skype also. So many thanks. It is safe to conclude that social media cannot automatically or single-handedly launch a revolution. This is not to say that social networks don't matter. They matter a lot, but they do not incarnate freedom and do not bring about some final heaven-like stage of human history. In order for social media to be effective in initiating change, they have to be complemented by an active civil society with well-organized political groups and networks. Social media are often a useful complement to the kinds of activism that take place in the offline world, but they are not a decisive factor in determining the outcomes of uprisings and revolutions. At the end of the day, the success or failure of political movements depends primarily on political activism in the real world, rather than merely cyber activism in the virtual world. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.